Welcome everybody back to the Nugget, the 49ers, and really just a pre-draft episode. We haven't been on in a while. Been super busy, been kind of hard to schedule some recordings and stuff. We wanted to get a lot more during draft content, but weren't able to. So we're gonna do this episode after the draft. We're gonna have another episode just recapping a bunch of stuff and stuff. We'll talk about his development. We'll talk about the rookies. We'll talk about the younger players, guys stepping into larger roles and whatnot throughout the offseason. But for today's episode, first off, I think the big looming question mark is what is going to happen with Deebo Samuel. So, Aiden, what do you think is actually going to happen with Deebo Samuel? And when we record next week, is he going to be a 49er? Is he not going to be a 49er? What are you kind of thinking right now?
It may be the optimistic route, but I'm 80% sure Deebo will be a Niner come next week. There's reports out right now that if he's going to be traded, it'll be before Thursday's draft. Everything that John Lynch said yesterday made it sound like they don't want to trade Deebo. He was without a doubt the MVP of the organization last year. Really carried them on his back to the playoffs into the NFC title game. Um, I think he's a fantastic player. I think right now there's so many reports about why he's unhappy and we don't know what's true or what's not. The only one that I'm truly concerned about is that he doesn't want to play wide back moving forward. He wants to be a traditional wide receiver. And while he's super talented in that, I think a large portion of his value is his versatility. And if he doesn't want to do that I don't even want to call it gadget stuff. If he doesn't want to be lined up like all over the formation and have the ball in his hands more often, that would be the only thing that I think would cause the Niners to be like, we might have to move on from him. But I fully expect him to be a Niner next year. And possibly, I still think that there's probably 80% chance that he gets extended. I think it was just kind of I think that his brother kind of forced the hand that they were going to play. And he kind of went about it in a bad way, but I think it was a way of posturing for more money. And in 6 months, no one's really gonna think about this episode in the 49ers offseason as long as he gets re-signed. So I think that that's the goal of both sides. But I was 99% sure two weeks ago that Deebo would be a Niner, and that number is down to 80. So definitely moving in the wrong direction, but I'm still cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting to bring up just because I think a lot of people, when you see a player says, "Oh, I want out," they assume that, okay, that guy's gone. But that's not really the case in the NFL. We see that so often where receivers come out, they're like, "Oh, I want." Doesn't even happen right away. So in a lot of these cases, I feel like you don't really see the player that wants to get traded actually traded. I wouldn't put my number of him staying on the 49ers at 80. I think he's more likely to get traded. I would probably say like 60-40, but I think that most people feel like it's almost a lock that he's going to get moved. And I definitely don't feel that way. I think that a couple weeks ago, like you said, I would have said like, nah, it's like a 90% chance that Deebo is going to be a 49er. It's just, it happens. But there's been a lot of stuff come out. I don't know if you watched the John Lynch presser, but it did kind of feel like he was just, yeah, of course we want Deebo, but like it's not really working out. And that's kind of how it felt like he was coming across. So I feel like they're kind of in the route of maybe we're gonna have to move him, and maybe it's worth it for us to move him because we're going to get a huge amount of draft capital back. We don't really know if we want to pay him because of the injury history. Now, do you want him on your team? Yes, 100%. Of course, you want Deebo Samuel on your team. I think he was the best offensive player in the league last year. But there are some other factors at play, and I think it makes it a little tough. And I think a lot of that has to do with I think the Jets will give up. I mean, it already came out that they would give up pick 10, and I think they'd give up more than pick 10. So I think you can get a premium player if you do move Deebo Samuel, and you're also saving a lot of money. Now the problem I have with it is really comes down to Trey Lance. You go and you trade all this draft capital for Trey Lance, and then you're going to move his weapon right when he's about to start, his biggest weapon right when he's about to start. I get that Brandon Ayuk is, a better fit for the offense under him as like the true number one receiver, but I still think you can figure out how to use Deebo Samuel in the offense. I mean, I don't know. That's the part that I don't like because we saw with DeForest Buckner, it kind of made sense at the time. Now the problem was you went and you traded for D Ford, and D Ford, ended up making basically Buckner's money. So you kind of felt handicapped a little bit, but you moved Buckner, and that's kind of blown up in their face. And I really think that's the only thing so far in the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era that's really blown up in their face. I think besides that, of course they have misses, but I don't think they're that big of a deal. Like no one's losing sleep every night, like over Joe Williams getting picked. Like it's not that big of a deal. You move on. You're gonna miss draft picks. You're gonna hit on a bunch of late round draft picks. So it kind of balances out in that regard. But when you have a superstar player and you trade a superstar player and then you can't replace him with that draft capital, it gets pretty tough. So there's a lot of pressure on if they do trade him, the guys that come in. But I think that's something that they might feel just like their hand is a little bit forced. And also like I don't know. I think it's a really tough spot because we'll know if he's going to get traded before the draft starts on Thursday. We will know that. You said Rappaport came out and said that earlier, Aiden. So we're going to find out. But if he is traded, Aiden, what's the capital? I know that the three teams that have been interested are the Jets, the Lions, and the Packers. What would you expect in a return for him?
I think the value has been actually stuff like I can't think the last time a guy hasn't been traded and his value has been like leaked like this. The Jets are gonna offer 10 apparently, and that's already more than Tyreek Hill and Devonta Adams got traded for. They both got traded for the equivalent of around the 13th pick. So if the Jets were to give up 10 and potentially even more, I saw something today. The Lions are interested. As long as he doesn't go to the Packers, I think the Niners they don't really care about keeping him in the NFC because the Jets aren't that much of a threat yet, and I don't think that their timeline is super accelerated by Deebo showing up. But um, like I said, I don't think he's going to get traded. If somebody offers you 4 first-round picks, um, like you obviously do it. But I think that if the Niners were to trade him, their goal, and while this probably wouldn't happen, would be to replace what they lost trading up for Trey Lance last year. I think that would be the overall goal. I read something a couple days ago that's what a GM thinks is the minimum Lynch would move Deebo for, given that he doesn't want to move him. But I think as long as Lance is a hit, like it won't cripple the 49ers organization moving forward, but it's always bittersweet for me to trade an established player for draft picks because there's such a high chance, even if it's a high pick, that he's gonna bust. I think AJ Jenkins, tons of Joe Williams is a third round pick and never even saw a snap. Um, I usually on the side of caution, if someone is a superstar, all pro first team like Deebo is, you never want to trade him. John Lynch is saying all the right things and he's agreeing with that. But if it comes down to it, I think that their goal would be to replace what trading up for Lance cost them last year. But I don't know if a team would even offer that. That's 2 first-rounders in the third, I think, and that's probably would end up being 2 late 1st-rounders. I think the Jets could potentially move some stuff around and trade down from 10 and get something like that. But it'll be definitely interesting moving forward to see if he does get traded and for how much. Because if it's what he's getting talked about for right now, that's more than Adams and Hill got traded for, which I don't think people would have really expected given his injury history and only 1 year of really elite production.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's why the 49ers are a little bit wary to sign him to a long-term deal. We were talking about it before. Ideally, Deebo's a guy you bring back on a 2 to 3 year deal that's fully guaranteed, where if he gets hurt, it's not going to cripple you years down the road. But if you're going to pay him to play on your team for five years later, and he's making $25 million and almost all that is guaranteed, it is very likely that he's kind of a little bit of a broken player, just like because of all the injuries that he's had, because of the similarity in the injuries he's had, a lot of hamstring stuff. And I think that's why they're concerned. I get it, but I'm with you. Like, you don't want to trade Deebo Samuel. So I think it's tough. I think if I'm looking at value, and I think you brought up the Jets and the Lions. You were saying that the Lions, if you trade them within the NFC, like the Lions, it's not really a big threat. The Lions, I think what they would offer is probably something like 32 and 34, because they have both of those picks. The Packers have picked 28. They also have picked 22. So maybe one of those in a second. But the Jets did say that they would trade away 10, and or it was reported that they had offered 10 plus, for the Deebo Samuel deal. So if you were to get 10, obviously that's the premier spot. Now, this is a draft class where having that top end guy doesn't really change it that much from like a high first end guy to a late first round guy. Just because like we see some draft classes where you want to get in like the top few picks because look at last year. Look at the guys you could have landed there. It was insane. Like Micah Parsons was what, 12, 11. Like Justin Fields 11, quarterbacks, 1, 2, 3. You have Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase. Like there's just so Penny Sewell. Like there's just so many high end players. I don't think this draft class is quite there. I think part of that is that there's not. I don't think there's. I think there's one first round quarterback in my opinion, and they're not going to get taken super high. Maybe they do. Maybe the Panthers take a quarterback, but if you're at pick 10, the guy that I would really want, and I don't think 49er fans love this idea, I would really want Kyle Hamilton. And I hear people going like, "Oh, he's Blitz Boy 2.0." Like, I don't think so. I think this guy is way more instinctual. I think he's a way better athlete. He's not necessarily fast, but he's not going to have the coverage responsibility that other box safeties have in the league because he's going to be playing next to Fred Warner. Fred Warner will go man up on a slot receiver. Fred Warner will man up on a tight end. If you have Kyle Hamilton in the box just game wrecking, the amount of turnovers that this defense will produce will skyrocket next year. So I think if you do have to trade him, if you're able to add Kyle Hamilton, that's an elite playmaker. That is a really, really good guy to have in as your box safety. On the defensive side, what would you consider this team's holes? Box safety. They got Odom. That's about it. For that role. D tackle. But I'm kind of confident some of the guys there. I mean, I'd probably say you need a one tech. So that's about it on defense. Like, I don't think you're really pushing to add anything else. You have Jimmy Ward at safety. You went out. You signed Charvarius Ward. Like, I think they're all right. But if they were to move Deebo Samuel for pick 10, would that be the guy that you would want, or who would you be trying to target?
Um, I think that you could always use another edge. I think Hamilton is maybe the best guy in this draft, but he's not at a premier position for drafting. But he's like 6'4", rangy, can cover. He can do anything on the football field. He almost acts as a fourth linebacker, but does safety stuff. He can tackle. I think he's really, really, really good. Um, the only guy I think the Niners would love to get over him if they were to get to 10 and you have a realistic shot would be Kayvon Thibodeau out of Oregon, who both of us think is going to be probably a top 6 pick. But a couple weeks ago, there was some talk that he could fall. And if he falls to 10, he is such a crazy athlete that you could spend some time molding him. And if he hits, Bosa opposite Thibodeau would be the premier pass rushing duo in the league and probably the best one in the last 15 years, probably. Similar to Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, or no, Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware, but both of those guys were veterans. So to have two young guys like that would be awesome. So I think the Niners value edge highly, and I expect them to go edge earlier than a lot of people expect. But we don't think Thibodeau is going to be there at 10, but he's the only guy that I think above Hamilton, who you made some great, great points about, and I totally agree on, would transform the defense. But like I said, I don't expect us to get to 10. I really don't want to trade Deebo. But if it happened like that, I think you could do a lot worse than like a top 10 talent in a super deep draft class. It's not super top heavy, but there's starters available in the third round. So to get as many picks as possible is huge.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and I think it'll be interesting to see just how it all plays out. I'm with you. I don't wanna see Deebo Samuel wearing a different jersey. I wanna see him playing for the 49ers next year. I think that's really important for Trey Lance, because another thing that's if you move Deebo Samuel, you have to go try to find another receiver. So, like, it's gonna cause a lot of problems. Yeah, you're gonna get some draft capital. I'm not a big person, like you said, like trading star veteran players for draft capital. Most of the time, the capital doesn't get the return that you want. However, you have a lot of cases where a guy's traded and he's not the same guy after he gets traded too. But we've already seen what Deebo Samuel can do in San Francisco. When he's healthy, he is one of the best offensive players in the league. So hopefully Deebo Samuel is a 49er when we record next week. But we'll see how all that plays out. One other thing I want to get before we just go maybe over a couple guys in the draft that we really like. Alex Mack seems like he's retiring. John Lynch, they asked John Lynch point blank, is Alex Mack retiring? He said, Alex will discuss that with you guys. And then there was also a picture of the 49ers locker room that was leaked or, I don't know, posted or whatever. And there's a trash can next to Mack's locker. And it looks a little weird. So nothing official. But that's been something that's been floated around throughout the offseason. We saw how Joe Staley retired, how he waited until after the draft. Do you think the 49ers would go spend premium capital to go get a center, considering that right now their two guards are Banks and Brunskill, and their center is Alex Mack. So if you don't have him, you're looking really, really weak on the interior. I like Brunskill. I think Banks is a major question mark, and then you would not have a center. So JC Treader was also brought up as a guy you could sign. Um, what would your kind of route be for the 49ers if Alex Mack does indeed retire?
I don't think that they would spend premier capital on a rookie to start right away. Linderbaum is a fantastic prospect, but Kyle's system is super duper tough, especially for a center to learn right away. And that's a lot of pressure on a center to figure all that stuff out in just training camp and the, walk into a Super Bowl ready caliber team. So I think that they would rather go veteran. I think if Mac retires, they just slide Brunskill over. He has a ton of familiarity with the system, and they either look to sign a guard like a Tom Compton level guard that nobody's ever heard of, but has been with Kyle for forever. There's there's got to be five or six more of those guys. And I truly think that Banks is ready. I think Banks will play right guard, and they'll do something at the left guard position. He could play left guard, but um, I really don't know. I'm not sure Alex Mack is done. I'd love to have him back. I saw the stuff you saw, but until he makes an announcement, I'm going to be crossing my fingers that he wants to give it one more run. But I could see them taking a center in the fifth round and being like, if you hit right away, awesome. But let's plan for you to start year two, because that's what the Niners do with most of their draft picks anyway. So I'd be surprised if you get a first or second round center, but I guess nothing's out of the realm of possibility. And if Kyle thinks that he can have a center for the next 15 years, I think he would jump all over it. But so many question marks with how hard his system is to learn. And you really don't want the center holding you back from being a Super Bowl team. So I think it's a really interesting point. And I'm super interested to see how the 49ers handle it moving forward.
Yeah, I think that kicking Brunskill over to center does make a lot of sense because you bring up, you know, this is an offense that's really hard to operate, and the center is such a focal part of the offensive line. Like some people have made the argument that in Kyle's system, the center is the hardest position to play or the most important position, even over left tackle, which is not every system. So I think that has pretty fair to bring up because like also if you move Brunskill to center, I don't think it's like, oh, Brunskill won't be able to hang. Like he's been solid for 3 years now. He's been really, really solid. Um, a big surprise, like because he just kind of came out of nowhere. But he's been a huge player when you look at like all the 49ers success that they've had. So I definitely like the idea of having him. I don't really like the idea of spending a lot of draft capital. I will say Tyler Linderbaum gets talked about super, super high, like that he is going to be an amazing player in the NFL. So if he slides really late because of the position, and you're able, and say you're in the second, say if you do trade Deebo, whatever it is, you're able to make a trade that you don't feel like is that much draft capital to go move up and get him. I don't think it's a terrible idea because that will help you a lot right then. But then the question kind of becomes, would he start at center day one? Because that is a lot to ask of a rookie NFL center. So maybe he wouldn't even do that. So I think it's hard to tell. Either way, though, if Alex Mack does not retire, they still need to address the interior offensive line. They still need to go do that. You lost like in Tomlinson. So I'm a little that's probably the biggest area that I'm concerned about this team. I brought up the needs. I think you probably need another receiver. I think you might need another tight end. I don't really know. Like I think there's things that you can go and get like premium, like try to get like I don't know, go like above and beyond at a position and try to make it like an elite spot. If you go and add a tight end, because there's a lot of good tight ends in this class, and you have Kittle and another really good tight end, that helps so much, right? But interior offensive line is a spot where this team is really lacking. I think it's the biggest weakness on the roster. I would have said that last year was corner, but now you don't have Lakin, potentially don't have Alex Mack. That's a huge blow. Like I think that's really, really underrated because we also talk about you want to have a cohesive unit in your offensive line. You want guys that are consistently playing. Losing two of your five guys is tough. And two of those five guys being veterans that have played in the system and are really experienced, and you're going to replace them with a second year player and potentially a rookie or another young player. It's really tough. So I would also be very pro signing JC Treader just because you're not going to have to go break the bank for him, but he's played almost all of his career games. He's been a really reliable guy, and it's kind of like you don't have to spend any draft capital, and you know you're going to get a good player. I think that's the safest option. I think that makes the most sense. However, you're going to have to wait until Jimmy Garoppolo is traded to do that because he's eating up a lot of that money. And I don't think we're gonna talk about Jimmy today, but I don't think Jimmy's going to get traded till he's fully healed because it doesn't really make sense. It seems like every team was like, yeah, if we're contending, we want a quarterback like Jimmy Garoppolo, or if we want to make a slight upgrade like that to contend. But for the Jimmy Garoppolo situation, if you're trying to contend and you don't get to see him throw the football until training camp, that's a huge issue. So I think that's why you didn't see him get traded. I think it's just kind of have to wait. It sucks in that case because I mean, based off what some of these other guys got, I think the 49ers could have got a second plus for Jimmy. What did Carson Wentz get? He got a second. Like I don't know. I think that it just seems like Jimmy won't get traded till then, and you're gonna have to kind of wait at center, which does make it scary then because then JC Treader could get scooped up. So maybe Jimmy does get traded during the draft for like nothing, or I don't know how it's gonna work out, but I do think that's something to note that you could go after him. But that's the biggest area of need right now for the 49ers, I'd say. Do you think I'm over exaggerating that or no?
No, I think that that's totally fair. If the Panthers called you during day 2 of the draft and offered you a 7th rounder for Jimmy, do you take it? Because I think John Lynch does not take it.
I don't think he does. I think they would offer more too. Like I
I
think they'd
mean,
offer like a fourth or something like
I'm
that.
saying as a complete lowball, they offer a 7th, and then you counter with something else, and they're like, "No, well, it's the most we can do." Do you trade him during the draft to clear that money for a 7th, which is it's basically nothing. It's a throw
Yeah.
at a dartboard.
It's so you don't you can cut him and you don't have to give up the 7 million
Yeah.
of like the injury guarantee.
Mhm.
So I'd say it depends. If you're gonna do that, because I think everyone gets really tight on the draft capital, and it would
Mhm.
suck. It would look like a big loss for the Niners. Like that would be a bad looking move for them. However, if you're doing that and then you go and you trade Deebo Samuel because you have to, and you go to 10 and you get Kyle Hamilton, or you get a difference maker on the defensive side of the ball, and then you go, okay, Alex Mack also retired. We're gonna go get J.C. Treader, and we're gonna sign. I think a guy that they would sign is Julio Jones. I know we've brought it up like a million times before, but like Kyle said like 2 years ago, like I would do anything in my power to get Julio Jones. So like I think there's definitely a possibility there. And then they go and they get a guy like that, and then they draft from the receiver, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, this team got so much better. And that draft pick, that third or fourth round or whatever it is for Jimmy being a seventh, doesn't really matter because you were able to add other impact players with that money. And I think that's been the big question mark with the whole Jimmy Garoppolo trading. My thought is they won't do it because they're going, we're going to extend Bosa and we're going to take that money and put that into a Bosa extension right away. So I don't think that their mindset is like, yeah, we need to go like get some money for signing free agents. I don't think that's what they want to do. I think they're fine with having a couple holes on this roster. And granted, it's not like the roster's like full of like, oh, we don't know who's going to play here. We have two guys can be. Their roster is very, very complete. Like it is one of the more complete rosters in the entire NFL. So I think that's worth bringing up. But I think it really just depends on, do you want to go make those moves for those veteran players? I don't think they do. But if they did want to, it does make some sense, even though everyone would be clowning John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan after that. Do you think they would?
I don't think John Lynch would. I think he's maintained that they're not going to cut good football players. And Jimmy has his flaws, but he's a good player. He's a starting caliber quarterback. I think that there's a higher probability of the Niners keeping Jimmy on the team week 1, which I think would be a bad move given creates a mate like locker room divide and just creates things that do not need to be there. But I mean, Trey Lance handled last year better than I would have. 100%. He played it perfectly. Waited for his turn. It's his turn. I just hope Jimmy would do the same to him if and when Trey beats him out during camp. But maybe Trey needs more time. I really don't know. I think John Lynch would keep Jimmy before he would trade him for a seventh, and I think you would have the football team last year, who are now the Commanders. When Fitzpatrick went down, like a team like that who thought that they could make the playoffs, I could see them doing a third for Jimmy going forward, or like somebody in that vein. I think Lynch's would wait for that more than just jump all over a seventh. Um, but I mean, I don't really know. The Niners have been really good about keeping what's actually happening behind closed doors. So it's really just speculation that everyone's doing, and um, I think this is a really interesting time to be a 49ers fan, because we could look very different over the next week and a half. So super excited for Thursday. It's one of my favorite days of the year. Um, and I'm really interested to see where the 49ers go moving forward. And I think that they have still super duper bright future. I think that they're the best team in the NFC West, uh, possibly the best team in the NFC. Brady coming back complicates things in Tampa Bay, but I think it'll be super duper cool to be a 49ers fan next year still, even with all the question marks that we've endured over the last couple weeks.
Yeah, so you bring up the draft a little bit. Who are some guys that you want to see the 49ers go after? Maybe early guys, maybe a couple late guys. I don't know. Are there any guys in mind that you really want to see the 49ers take on Thursday?
Um, no, I haven't fallen in love. I haven't done the work that I did last year, but um, there's all like David Bell. We talked about a little bit before. I think he's really solid. I think he could be Pierre Garcon ish. His main knock is that he's a little bit slow, but in the NFL, as long as your game speed is high, like Raheem Mostert, his game speed is faster than his 40, and his 40 is still blazing fast. That's what matters more than how fast you can run in a straight line with no pads. Deebo's another guy who I think he ran like a 4.5 or mid 4.5, but nobody like he consistently outruns people. Um, so I think he's a guy who, if Deebo were to walk, and even if he doesn't, they're not sold on Jawan Jennings as the number 3 guy moving forward. He's a guy later. I think you said that he's mocked at the end of the 3rd round. That I could see them target and turning into a very productive player. But like you said, no crazy holes. I haven't really done the interior offensive lineman research, which is a bit of a grind. But I'm just excited to see playmakers, and one of my favorite parts of last year was looking at who we drafted and figuring out who they were. Hufunga jumped off the page, and he kind of turned into my favorite draft pick from last year. And he made a huge play in the NFC Championship. So it was super cool to see that, and it's just a super cool time to be an NFL fan.
And I think when you talk about like the draft, like I haven't done that many deep dives either. One guy I do think would be really interesting for the 49ers to take is Travis Jones from UConn, who's a big defensive tackle. They need to add a guy to play the one tech. I think some people have talked about Javon Kinlaw playing there. I think it's more likely that he still tries to play three tech, and more of that DeForest Buckner type of position. Even though he is big, like, he's a huge guy, but Travis Jones is a guy that you can put in. You can have him play one tech. He's going to command a bunch of double teams, and really, he might not be a guy that puts up a ton of stats, especially playing a position like that. But if he's attracting a lot of double teams, super powerful, super strong, where every time the center and the guard have to go down on him, you're going to see whoever it is outside of him, whether that's Bosa, Samson Ebukam, um, they draft an edge, like whoever that is outside, that guy's going to be one-on-one unless you bring a tight end to help. So I do think that they need to add another defensive lineman, another interior defensive lineman. Believe it or not, the 49ers are still in need of that, right? After about 100 draft picks in a row of defensive linemen. But I do hope that they spend premium capital to go get someone like that. And I think he's probably expected to be like a second or third rounder. Receiver wise, even if Deebo Samuel is not traded, I am not against adding another receiver or another weapon to this team. Two guys that I think are great values. One would be John Michie, who was Alabama's receiver, tore his knee, but he was a really, really, really good player. He's a speed player. The Niners don't really have a guy that's molded like that. He would be a perfect scheme fit, I believe, just because he'll take the top off on the defense. You have Brandon Ayuk as kind of like your best guy to do that, but there's not really anyone that flashes like, oh yeah, he's just going to go out there and he's going to run a lot of deeper routes. You're going to need that with Trey Lance. Trey Lance is going to push the ball down the field a lot. So adding a guy like John Michie could pay huge dividends throughout the season. And he might not put up a crazy rookie year or anything, but his role is so important. So I think that adding a speed guy, I think he would be a great guy to add into the second, early third, late third. I don't know where he's going to go because he's coming back from the knee, but he is going to play. He's expected to come back this summer. Um, and with a lot of guys that have knee injuries, like unless they're like super serious or like how Trent Balk would draft guys that have like, like the most ridiculous knee, you'll end up coming back. So I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world that he tore his knee. I think that he's going to be able to regain form and be the elite playmaker that he's been and was at Alabama. So I like adding him. Another guy, a little bit weird guy to bring up, and I might be pronouncing his name wrong, but Jalen Widemeyer. I don't know. Is that right? Okay, so Jalen Widemeyer.
I know
Uh,
who you're talking about. I don't know if it's right. I think
good
people will
pronunciation.
yeah,
Yeah, if
but
if I'm wrong, let me know.
good enough, good enough.
Yeah, yeah. So he's a tight end from Texas A&M. He's going to slide way down draft boards because he didn't run at the combine, and at his pro day, he ran over a 540. However, he was injured when he ran it. There have been so many guys that have come out and ran horrible 40s. The big one that I remember is Keenan Allen because Keenan Allen was supposed to be a first round receiver. He was supposed to run like 4.5, and he ran like a 4.7 or a 4.8. He was super slow. Not a 5. A 5 is awful. But he had an injury, and he ran through and he did that. And then he gets drafted in the third round. Everyone goes, oh yeah, that doesn't matter at all. Jalen Widemeyer is a monster blocker. He be he was supposed to be a second or third round pick before he ran this 40, and now he's gonna be like a fourth or fifth rounder. I don't believe like when you watch his tape, like he does not look like he's a 540 guy. He looks like he's running like a 4.7. That's what it looks like he runs. So he might not be the fastest guy in the world. He's an amazing blocker. He's a great guy to have as your number 2 tight end. And if you're getting him in the fourth or fifth round, the best part is that I think he's probably the best receiving tight end of the entire draft because he absolutely destroyed guys at Texas A&M, just running post corners, just going insane. So I think that if you can get Jalen Wydermyer on day 3, I think that's an absolute steal. So I hope the 49ers go after him. He does feel like he fits the physicality, and if you watch Texas A&M, they will force feed the ball to him at some time. So I think he's a great player. I would love for them to go after him. Um, Another guy that has been brought up. I haven't really watched him too much, but I think he's worth noting is Marcus Jones. So Marcus Jones is a nickel corner, and he's also a returner. Another position of need that the 49ers have is they need to get a returner. I do not want to see Brandon Ayuk returning punts. I thought he was really bad at it last year. But Marcus Jones is a guy that's like a 3rd-round pick. He can come in. He can potentially start at nickel. He would compete with Diamador Lenore. I mean, that's who I think he would compete with, don't you? I think it's E-Man and Travarius Ward outside, and then right now it's just kind of a competition to see who's going to play slot. I think if Marcus Jones is that guy, I think it'd be really intriguing. Like I said, I don't know a ton about him. He played on Houston, supposed to be a 2nd or 3rd rounder. But if he can fit that, if he can be a rookie, start at nickel and start as a returner, he is definitely worth a day 2 pick. So I'm intrigued by him as well. But Aiden, anyone else or anything else you want to bring up on the draft before we take off out of here?
No, I think that we hit it so well last year with that Elijah Mitchell mock draft, which was super cool to see him do awesome this year. Hopefully, one of the guys that we just said the Niners end up picking and ends up having a really good rookie year. Obviously, Matt talked about a lot more guys than I did, but this is like I mentioned, like one of my favorite times of the year because it's limitless possibility. So excited to see how the Niners look on Friday morning and specifically Monday morning because the 5th round I think is on Saturday. So that's where the Niners make their money. So excited to see who the new members of the 49ers organization are going to be. And hopefully Deebo is still a part of the team going forward and just good to get back at it.
So what you're really telling me is that if the 49ers take Jalen Wydermyer in the 5th round, he's killed 2.0, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. We will be back post-draft, and then we'll probably go on that little hiatus after that. But yeah, sorry we weren't able to do a lot of draft content. I was hoping to get a ton of stuff out. Didn't really get a chance to watch the guys in volume that I have in the past, which was honestly a big bummer to me because Aiden, like you said, for me too, like draft time is one of the favorite things. And this year, I feel like over maybe like the past 5 years, I know the class less than I have, which really sucks, honestly. But I'm excited. I'm still pumped for draft day. I'm gonna be watching with a couple buddies, and they know the class a lot better, so I'm gonna kind of get the breakdown as we go throughout it. But I'm super pumped. And hopefully the 49ers retain Deebo Samuel. Hopefully they add a few playmakers to help Trey Lance and clean up the offensive line, add a box safety, do all that kind of stuff. So we'll see how it plays out, but we'll be back here after the draft talking about all these picks, talking about who we really like, maybe some of the moves that the 49ers make. But thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you very soon.